This is the Plain English Real Estate Show with your host, Rowena Patton, a show that focuses on the real estate market in terms you can easily understand. Call Rowena now. The number is 240-9962 or 1-800-570-9962. Now here's the English girl in the mountains, the agent that I would trust, Rowena Patton.
Good morning and welcome to the Real Estate News Radio Show. We've got lots for you today. We've got an update from Kelly in Utah. We have Joe Shively live in the studio. Our amazing, I think you were called a legendary builder, Joe. How about that?
You called me that.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It wasn't me. It was one of your clients, actually. That's not that I wouldn't call you that, of course. Just saying. But yeah, that was pretty cool, right? So welcome back to the show, Joe.
I'm glad to be here.
It's your show, Joe. Show, Joe. Oh, I like that. So today we're talking about the 6 biggest financial mistakes when you're building a home and how to avoid them. You got any thoughts on that, Joe? Tell us about some disasters way back in the past so nobody gets embarrassed.
Well, a lot of these weren't my disasters, but I've seen them firsthand. One was
right. I guess you heard it from a friend.
building the house on someone else's property
by
accident.
No.
There's a reason the banks require a foundation survey before they disperse funds, and one of the reasons is, sometimes the guy putting your foundation, or if it's a homeowner, they actually didn't know exactly where their survey lines were and built the house either past their property line, and obviously that can be a gigantic mistake.
Oh my gosh. Well, and people think, oh, that stuff doesn't happen. Interestingly, I don't know if it's interesting or not. We had somebody selling a house. We were representing the buyer. This is a couple of years ago, or I heard it from a friend, and we were representing the buyer, and something strange was going on. So it was an agent from Florida who was representing herself and her 2 business partners. Her 2 business partners were in it as well, and they'd bought this house, and they were using it as, if I'm remembering correctly, they were using it as something like an Airbnb and coming up to stay in the summers, and now they'd just decided to sell it for whatever reason. They weren't my clients, so I don't quite know the background. So it turns out, and this is an agent, so imagine if a real estate agent can do this. So this real estate agent had bought the property, and somehow the title hadn't been done correctly, and she'd bought, so it was something like 3 parcels. She'd bought this tiny little triangle that was maybe worth $5,000 with no house on it. Isn't that crazy? And it was crazy. Years later, and now our buyers are trying to buy the house, which she was selling and didn't own. So all kinds of bad things go on there, right? So if you're a real estate agent with that listing, you could, that's a ding on your license waiting to happen, and all kinds of complaints, because you're supposed to do that due diligence. I think if I'm remembering correctly, it came up because, we did the buy, we were acting as the buyer's agent, and we did our due diligence, making sure what was going on with the property. So I think she was doing it for sale by owner, didn't realize that she didn't actually buy the house. This is a house they were selling for $400,000 or $500,000, and they only actually owned a little triangle of land. I'll tell you something even crazier, and this is a testimony to who people are in the mountains of Western North Carolina. WNC strong, baby. So they went back to the heirs. Get this, it was heirs of the property that they bought it from years earlier, and they said, oops, we made a mistake when we gave you $500,000 for your house. We didn't actually purchase your house. And by the way, that's all legal. Try fighting that in court. You've given over $300,000 or $500,000 or whatever they gave over at the point when they bought it, and they bought this little triangle of land. Well, it's up to you to do, caveat emptor, buyer beware. It's up to you to do your due diligence. How the attorneys didn't spot it is beyond me, but all this got through. So it's true, and it happened here. Can you believe that it was 2 or 3 heirs that owned the property? They signed off on it.
That's a miracle.
It is a miracle. Joe, you are exactly right. It's nothing short of a miracle. And, our clients then went ahead with the purchase. And it was all amazing that all went through. But that is yet another true story from the mountains of Western North Carolina. But this stuff goes on all over the country. And it's remarkable what you just said, and it's kind of the same thing, right?
It's happened several times that I know of around here, for sure.
Oh, you've known about it several times? Wow.
Yeah, more than once, for sure. Another thing, you see a lot of clients that like to do some land clearing themselves, so they might go in there and cut a bunch of trees, or have their brother-in-law come in and cut a bunch of trees down
That's
low.
common, very common.
So
yeah.
you can't get, if you cut a big tree down, it's very easy to dig around it and push it over with an excavator. But if you cut it down low, all of a sudden that turns into a multi-hour paying, hundreds of dollars for each stump.
A stump grinder, I've had that done.
Right.
I think, if I remember correctly.
It's not cheap.
Yeah, I took down about 7 40, 50-foot pines, which is very funny if you knew the size of my lot. Well, you've seen the size of my lot, actually. It's like 0.1 or less. I mean, it's a little lot on a very steep overlook over the River Arts District, actually. The river's right down at the bottom. And I took down these massive, massive pines. And they did not pull them. I mean, I guess, had they been cut higher, of course, I didn't know that. Had they been cut higher, what you're saying is you could pull them over with an excavator.
Dig around a little bit and push it right over.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think every one cost me $200 to $300 with a big stump grinder guy coming in. It's also really messy. It's
you
a
can
heck
imagine
of a
if
job.
You had 50 of them.
Yeah.
Or
well, I
30.
had 7.
Yeah.
So, it probably would have been half the price to bring in the excavator to pull it over.
Sure.
Yeah, because you need that leverage, right?
Yep.
You need the shear force. Is that what it is? Or is it the other kind of force?
Well, you can reach up high and push it over.
Yeah.
I'm motioning with my hands, but you can't.
But yes, that's really interesting. I never thought about that. And so the first one that we talked about was not knowing where your land is, basically. Let's talk about some solutions for that and how we put it right. I want to go back to that before we talk about pulling the trees off and clearing the land, because
luckily hopefully you'll have good neighbors. I mean, it's possible somebody could trade you a piece of land on one side for a piece of land on the other. I've heard of that happening, and in one case, I don't even know what they did. A friend of mine had an addition they built, and it was across the neighbor's property line.
Oh gosh!
Somebody that wasn't a licensed contractor came there and
they'll
built
do it.
Yep.
I've got one next to me, actually, that one of the family members built right onto the property line, which means that if I put a fence up there now, they've got no access to the back of their house. We have literally... So, guys, you've got to believe this stuff happens, and it's not... I've had people come up from Florida or New York or California because we help people from all around the country. And I've had people say things like, it just happens in the mountains because you're all rinky-dink. Actually, we have some of the strongest real estate laws here of anywhere in the country. We're one of the 5 states left that's an attorney state. So it's not a title company you go in when you close your property. You go into an attorney. That attorney is looking it all over. Not there's anything wrong with title companies. I'm not saying that. But we have very strong restrictions here. So the key thing is always get a survey. But also you're putting rights, the sins of the fathers, right? Because when you bought a property and you didn't have a survey, you may have, get this one, I don't know if you've seen this before, Joe, a septic, and this is a real story from a house we were helping someone buy. The septic was built under the porch extension.
There's a reason nowadays if you pull a building permit for an addition or even a deck, they'll come out and inspect where your lines are at, where your septic tank, because it happens,
Now, why wouldn't you... Because somebody's going to ask this. Why wouldn't you build a septic under the extension? Or an oil tank is also a very common one here. So when you've got, or anywhere in the Northeast too, because, an HVAC, a heat pump, doesn't necessarily tackle, it just doesn't tackle once you get down certain degree. Do you know what that is? It's probably 30 degrees.
It's not as efficient when it's under like 40 degrees.
40
right?
degrees,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So
it runs off the heat strips, which is very, it makes the meter spin like a top, basically.
Yes, and it doesn't get hot. It reminds me of growing up in England where we had, they were called storage heaters. I thought I was going to struggle there for a minute. And these were basically big blocks that heated up on the cheap electricity during the day, and then they let go of the heat it's the other way around. cheap electricity at night, and then they let the heat go during the day. The problem was, by the time it got to 7 or 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night, it wasn't very warm. It can't cope with that lower heat. So what do you do then? You have gas, natural gas, or you have Earl, as they call it in the mountains. Am I saying it right, Joe?
Earl.
Oh, come on, Randy. You got to do it.
All.
I have to do it phonetically, which is or. How would you spell that exactly?
All. And most
All.
of those
I don't know.
tanks.
Orll. Oral. Is that better? Oral.
Oh, it's closer.
Oral.
I've
There you
dug up
go.
several of those doing renovations around a house, and a lot of times those are leaking for years, and people don't know.
Oil
So
tanks.
they're basically paying to oil the dirt around their foundation.
Which is a major problem and that's another thing to think about when you're buying a house or, we're talking today about the expensive mistakes you can make when building one. Generally, you're not going to put an oil tank in, or am I wrong, Joe? Is anybody
They really
putting
don't do that much anymore. Propane tanks,
oral?
Earl. But basically, even though you may have a piece of property that's had an existing house on it, you have to know exactly where everything is, where power lines are.
Yeah.
You have a designated area for your well. You have to be a certain amount of feet away from that with your house and septic. And you don't want to infringe on those areas. You can have some huge financial messes.
Well, and a lot of people, and I often recommend this. If you're going to build a house, find a lot that's got an old manufactured home on it, because that means you already have something in place. It's usually septic. It's usually well. It may or may not be an UST. They're called underground storage tank. That may be oil. It may be propane. Is there anything else it could be?
I've actually done that. That was my first house. I bought a trailer and on land and moved it. Gave it away basically and built a house on it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's very common to do, and you can get a very well-valued piece of land at that, because you don't have to start all over again. Now, you may be adding a line to the septic. Maybe, you're building a bigger house. You have to have one line per bedroom at least. Well, you don't have to, actually, but if you want to sell it and make some money off it later, always think about an exit plan. If you want to sell it in 10 years, 20 years, 6 months, you need to make sure you can add lines to it if you're making the house bigger, because we can only put on the MLS, we can only advertise it, the number of lines there are, and each line is a bedroom, essentially. Why it's a bedroom and not a bathroom, none of us can ever figure out, but that's a whole other story. But yeah, we're thinking about things that are already in place for a new home. That's a way to solve that, actually. An expensive mistake is, that we can literally segue onto, what about the people who build the septic after the house is built? I love that one. What if then it doesn't, why does that happen?
You have to be approved to get a building permit. So that shouldn't happen. Now, it could be that somebody screws up and digs into the septic field or something. But
yeah.
But you have to have an approved septic permit. They test the ground before you ever start construction now.
But what? So what if the ground can change?
But you have to be careful buying property, because you just say your property is approved for septic, and it could be something called a drip system, which is very expensive. The difference is a conventional system might cost you $4,000 to $5,000 or whatever for average septic system, and a drip system could cost you like $30,000.
Whoa! What's a drip system?
It's basically,
I don't even know about that.
Yeah, it's what they use in steep and rocky land. A series of pipes.
And it drips out rather than seeps out by osmosis, I guess.
Yes, yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic. One of these days, we'll get a very knowledgeable person about septics on the show, because they are widespread throughout the country, actually. So maybe not so much in Florida or places that are closer to sea level. Is there any way you don't find septics? Do you know, Joe?
Where I lived at, you didn't. I mean, where I grew up at, near the coast, our well in our backyard was 14 foot deep. The water table is very high.
Wow.
So everything was city water and city sewer there.
And people, roll their eyes when you say septic and say, oh, I'm not going to buy a piece of land unless it's on city sewer. And I always say, we're all talking about being so green these days. You don't get more green than a septic system, right? Because it's going back to the earth. People go, oh, doesn't your yard smell? Your yard doesn't smell at all. The grass might be a bit greener.
Yeah, you don't have any choice anyway. It depending on where you live at. 'Cause if you're going to be out in the country, there is no city water or city sewer.
Correct.
In Leicester, for instance.
But people literally will we have a lot of people who are looking to build a home and looking for land to build a home on, and they say, I only want land that, because it's all, when land is listed on the MLS, and we have lots of land listings, by the way, in Western North Carolina. If you want to see them, you can go to mountainhomehunt.com, mountainhomehunt.com. I should have another one called mountainlandhunt.com. But yeah, you can just filter it by land. It'll find you all the land. You can filter on unrestricted. It's really the best search out there. It's got all the MLS boxes on it that you don't find on regular searches. Regular searches on websites, by the way, are looking to capture you as a lead. That's what real estate agents call them. So they'll give you a few choices as possible, but they're trying to get your name, your email, or mine does that as well after you've looked at a few. However, you will get access to like 60 different checkboxes for the MLS, and I can really hone in on the search for you, which means that you can put a little star on the land or the house that you're looking at, and then I can see it in your account, basically. And then I can guide you through which ones and where they are and everything else, which is extremely useful if you don't live here, obviously. Even for people that live here, I can talk you through the pros and the cons for that piece of land or that particular house for that matter. So really important when you're looking at that. But the thing about septics is, what's the other major pro of having a septic?
The other major pro, you don't have a big bill, I guess.
Exactly. No sewer bill.
No sewer bill.
Right, you don't have to think about the sewer bill. And you got to think, where's all that sewage going? It's going to treatment plants.
Sure.
It'd be kind of interesting, wouldn't it, if we could switch half of the population over to, I wonder what population is on septics. Probably 20% or something.
Wow, a lot
if you
here.
Took out the coast.
A lot in the mountains for sure.
Yeah, here it's probably 50%. And yet people are like, people get scared of septics, and I understand why. However, so with septics, you're meant to have them pumped. Again, expensive mistakes, right? When you don't have them pumped, they can back up, and it can get expensive. Thousands of
I've never
dollars.
pumped mine, and it's years old, but I don't have any trees on top of it. That's the key. You don't have
the roots going down, yeah.
And, I don't have a lot of people in the house. So if people are, flushing a lot of stuff down, using the trash disposal a lot, and if they have trees, if roots get down there, it just destroys it.
You're so correct about the roots. Randy knows my story about Washington, D.C., when I decided to put corn on the cob down my new waste disposal. It was a really powerful one, and I was showing off, basically. I was showing off, going, this thing's really powerful. It's more powerful than any waste disposal I've ever had, ever. And it was I'd remodeled the kitchen. It was gorgeous, actually. I kept the old cabinets. It was absolutely beautiful, 1925. And it had the old cast iron sink in that beautiful milky green color. You know what I'm talking about? Not ugly green, but the nice sort of pale green that they used to use. Those cast iron sinks with double sides that it takes 6 men to lift, or 6 strong women for that matter. One of those. It was amazing. So I thought it can take this really powerful waste disposal. And I put the corn on the cob down. And then they dug up the concrete on the apartment floor downstairs. My renter had to move out. Yeah, Joe's like wincing at this point. It was awful. She had to move out for like 3 months while we redid it was terrible. And why? Because the tree roots had grown through the terracotta pipes that were taking all that waste away. So, yeah, I've experienced tree roots. Tree roots are not fun. Well, for your foundation as well, right? So there's another mistake when you're building a new house. Don't plant all your... these people plant trees. Even if you've got a house now, it's not even building a new house.
Big trees, too. If you
Good
want to
Lord.
have trees near your house, have a dogwood or something small like that.
Yes. So something... And we're not experts on this, so don't sue us when you plant the wrong tree.
Not a weeping willow and not a poplar tree, for instance, or a pine tree, the very worst.
Oh,
around here,
gosh.
that.
Yeah, and so pine trees tend to be not long-lived, correct? And they're dropping gum
Very
and needles.
brittle, and they have some kind of homing device on them where they aim for your house when they fall.
I love that. They do. Mine was so close to the roof and to my Judy, my neighbour, who's sadly passed since. We're thinking about you, Judy. Rest in peace. You were such a fun neighbour. She would complain because all the needles were going on her roof. They're all going on my roof. Yeah, I mean, there were her pines too. No, I wasn't putting the pine needles on the roof, but it's a mess. All the sap on your car, and then they were, honestly, 40, 50 foot high on that tiny little lot. They'd have crushed the house, literally, with the homing device that they have to fall on it. Can you imagine in Helene what those pine trees would have done? I wouldn't have a house.
Yeah, and they tend to grow towards light too. So you have a cleared, house site, for instance. All the trees over the next 10 years after you build the house lean towards that area.
That's interesting. Sort of curve in.
Yep.
That's really interesting. I took mine out, and I wish. So when you're taking trees down, and this is for the tree guys out there as well, if you're having people coming to take the trees down, some people just cut them off at the root. I would not advise doing that. Get the darn things out. I know it's more expensive, but get the whole thing out. Is there any reason not to do that, Joe? Not to get the whole root out?
Well, sometimes you can't, it's not practical or very expensive, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you can kill the tree or if it's already dead, it's not a big deal. But
The problem is that root's going to rot over time. I always think about, I'm a long-term
termite food
girl.
as well.
I want to build a house. Maybe it's because I'm English, who knows. You go back to England, you can go in houses that have been there. There's a little church down by where I grew up that's been there for 850 years. So I'm always thinking about how do you build something, not just for my life, but a lot more lives as well. And those roots over time are going to rot, and then the ground's going to cave in, right? I mean, not necessarily cave in, but slowly.
Don't have big trees right next to your house. That's
Don't
the
have
key.
big trees next to your house.
Or over your septic field, right?
Or over your septic field.
The forest is the forest. That's where these big oaks and pines belong.
Yes.
Around your house, it's an understory,
Yes.
30 high, 30 wide, ornamental, dogwoods, cherries.
How do you know about this?
Just do. Don't put those big oak trees near your house.
Yeah.
Or don't build. Or
Well, that's a big one too,
yeah.
I think.
And they were the ones that really suffered during this hurricane was the oak trees.
I can
Yeah, and
only imagine.
They're considered a very strong tree, but I showed you the picture of the house I built in
Yes.
'96 that just snapped in two, and it was gigantic. I mean, three people couldn't reach around it. It snapped in two and just completely destroyed a house.
Gosh. And I saw so many, and you're still seeing them now, actually. I mean, they've cut them off at the root. But these massive trees, 40, 50, 60 foot high, just didn't snap and just toppled over, and the root ball is just sticking up all over the place, not just one or two here
Thousands, tens of thousands, right?
or there. Unbelievable. Yeah. So I just wanted to mention what I replaced the pine trees with, because I got the roots out, were laurels. So they're skip laurels, not the little Van Lucian's laurels. They have little leaves, but the skip laurels. And you can DM me if you're just look up Rowena Patton and DM me if you want a link to these things. They're evergreen. They grow. I've had them grow 20 feet, so they're not going to get higher than 20 feet. They grow about as fast as what are those things called? Not the green giants.
Cypress.
The cypress.
Leyland
the Leyland
cypresses.
cypress. Yeah, the Leyland cypress that people put in. That, by the way, have a very short life.
Yes.
In England, they plant them all around the house on these tiny little lots, and they get gigantic. They grow 2 or 3 feet a year, and then they die. And then you've got to replace this 20-foot tree. Don't do that. Have a look at the laurels. They're gorgeous. They're evergreen. They've got lovely, dark green, shiny leaves, beautiful flowers in the spring, and then they have big, dark berries. I like bushes and trees that are gifts that keep on giving. Flower, pretty leaves, berries, all that stuff. And they make a really, really nice hedge, a great privacy hedge.
Nice barriers make for good neighbor relations,
Neighbors.
right?
Yes.
We don't want to see our neighbor out in his underwear getting his newspaper or whatever.
And there's another expensive mistake when you're building a house. You're now 4 years in, and you're like, oh, I wish I'd put those trees in. Because guess what? I put my laurels in probably 5 years ago now. They are, you've seen them, Joe. How tall do you think they are? 15 feet?
Yeah, close to it.
Probably 15 feet high. That's plenty, especially on a small lot. Give them another few years, they'll be 20 feet high. Imagine if I didn't put them in when I moved. In fact, I've planted some now at the front because they've planted a new big rental house across the street. So I just want to sort of round off the corners a little bit more. And now they're tiny, so that you can't replace that mistake. You can't. It's very, very hard to buy a tree that's 20 feet high, if you even can. I mean, you can occasionally. Right now, I guess you could just go around and truck one that's fallen over and stick it in the ground. Does that work?
You probably have a snowball's chance, and you know what?
Probably not. That's right. So I want to check in with Kelly and Deanna in Utah. First off, let me give you a quick update about Susan and Dennis, who we're making great progress on their house. But Kelly, I want to check in with you in Utah just to see how you're getting on there. So, Kelly, you were looking to give an update on one of the senior living communities that you went to visit.
Yes, I got a return call, surprising to me, from one of the communities I visited, and they are hiring an additional sales executive. And the marketing director called me back and asked me if I would come back and represent the senior living CPO program to her and her new sales executive, which was completely caught me off guard. I'm not due, or I'm probably about due for another visit, an update with them, take some flyers and stuff. But she called me out of the blue, and it was like, excellent. I'll meet you. Give me a time. So I'm going to meet her in the next few days.
That's awesome. So your point is, Kelly, that when you're going into these senior living communities, which Deanna Allen is also on the call today, also goes in around your area, around Salt Lake City. They are really enjoying you going in. You said you were shocked that they called you back, but it's always a surprise when people are like, yes, please, you've got a program that's so useful for us, right? Is that what you're finding as you're going in and talking with those communities?
Well, correct. But it wasn't necessarily it was one of those I had to, it was on the schedule to go back and visit, take some flyers and reintroduce. But for her to remember and come back to me was like, it obviously made an impact, because it was a community I needed to get to. I literally had an elderly couple who were friends in my neighborhood. I knew them very well, and they went to this community. That's one of the reasons why I picked that zip code. And she remembered them, and the husband, sadly, passed away a year ago.
Oh.
But that was the reason I went to that, because I went out and visited them.
Yeah.
At least the wife, and the husband, he had Alzheimer's, dementia, whichever. I don't remember, but he wasn't in a stage to be visited. But it's like, I'm going to go visit this place because I know they picked it because it works for them.
Yeah. Yeah. So Deanna, this is Deanna Allen, who's our chief coach for senior living in Utah. Deanna, how are you getting on with Mary and Jerry? I've had people reach out this week to say, oh, we love the story about Mary and Jerry. So we're going to update you all. And I've got Susan and Dennis as well, who have now moved on to their new home. They're not in senior living. They've moved on to their new home through this program. But give me an update on Mary and Jerry. How's it going? So they're already moved into their senior living community, for those of you who haven't been following Mary and Jerry's story. And now we are doing the HGTV magic on the home, and then we'll be reselling it, and then Mary and Jerry will get another check. So how's it going, Deanna?
They will. Yeah, it's going really well. They are still moving in and getting settled in. So we were supposed to meet yesterday, but she asked for just a little bit more time. So we're rescheduled for next Tuesday to go visit them in their community and bring them a little move-in gift that Kelly and I put together. But yeah, things are going really well with them. She's super excited about how the first stage of the process went. They're looking forward to that next paycheck that will come when we sell the home. And Kelly's been in there working really hard to get that done.
How close are you to listing it now, Kelly? So you're doing the HGTV magic. What work have you completed now for Mary and Jerry? Are they able to get back and see the house as you're working on it? Are they going to see it at all, or is it too far away?
No, they're like 20 minutes away. And Mary came back 2 days ago. So I have it in a completely demoed situation, which doesn't mean that it's a disaster. No, I've got everything torn back and ready to put back together. In the next week or so, I will be. I'm literally picking up cabinets today.
Awesome.
And hopefully getting countertops templated in the next 2 days.
Awesome.
But in the next week, we will carpet the bedrooms, paint the bedrooms. I've had new doors made, so it will be just cute as a button when we're done.
That's fantastic. So you'll be getting it on Coming Soon here real soon, I'm guessing. And Coming Soon is an agent. So, you guys aren't agents who are listening, most of you at least. I know we do have a lot of agents listening around the country. What we do is almost everywhere in the country, we have a program called Coming Soon. That's when we put a house that we're listing on the market. You can't go into it yet because we're in the last couple of weeks of doing something to it. So are you getting it on that Coming Soon program, Kelly, I'm guessing?
It's getting close.
Good.
But yeah, I have some restrictions with the Coming Soon in my state.
Yeah.
So I have to have it ready, and then I have to put it on the MLS immediately just for reference. But we're within a few weeks of having it on the market.
Wonderful. And I'll give you an update on Susan and Dennis, who are now happily ensconced in their house in Ocala. We have finished the painting on their house at Tipperary. I will be getting it on Coming Soon because we've only got the painting left to do. And it's a wonderful house for this area because it has a pool. And for those of you in warm areas, most houses have a pool. No, we're in Asheville, North Carolina, and this is one that Joey, our CEO, managed to get through in the hurricane. There was no water in the house, and he still managed to get it through so that the house closed stage 1. And that Susan and Dennis could get off in their car with all their kitty cats and get down to Ocala, and now they're in their brand new home down there. I'm so happy for them. Meanwhile, we're working as busily as we can we did the inspection, we did the appraisal. Everything's been fixed on the inspection report, and, we have the appraisal in place, and all we need to do now is paint it and do the modifications. So, on inspections, for those of you selling a house or buying a house, they're not going to put the walls are cream or, the walls aren't nice and neutral. So therefore, that doesn't come up on the inspection. It's just items that are health and safety or need repairing. So the cosmetic things that can make your house worth so much more don't come up on that report, right? So what we're doing in that one is we're refinishing the countertops, we're refinishing the counters, we're putting new hardware on the doors, we're having everything painted. There was a little bit of wallpaper here and there. We're taking down the wallpaper, we're painting the fireplace white. It's going to look so clean and fresh and nice when it's done. And like I say, it has a pool. We probably have 2% of our houses, if that here, have a pool. It's in a great area in we call it Hot West Asheville. So, can't wait to get that one on, and that will be going on in the next week here. So expect to see some listing paperwork coming across, Joey. I know you'll take care of that for us very fast. So, yeah, that's our updates for this week. And thank you for listening to our next little episode there, guys, with me. So we want to have an update on what's happened with real estate after the hurricane. So obviously we had Helene in Western North Carolina. A lot of the market just stopped for a minute. Most of it is back on now. I'm having people call me all the time that want to come up to see the rest of the leaves or anything else. Is Asheville, North Carolina still devastated, or can we come? Most hotels are open. Most restaurants are open. We are still eating off paper plates. Asheville itself, the city, is still under a boil water advisory, which sounds scary to most people, except for us, we didn't have any phones, we didn't have any electric, we didn't have any water, we didn't have anything. So suddenly it's absolutely wonderful. And we also have Christine and Margaret on the phone, who are in the Bradenton area in Florida. Would one of you like to jump in and say what's happening there? Chris, you want to go first, as you're in Bradenton, I believe, and you took a direct hit there?
Yes. Bradenton, our beaches, Bradenton Beach, Anna Maria Island, they're still working on getting everything, all the sand, mainly out of the streets and debris picked up. But it's coming back. It's been, I think, probably about 4 weeks now, actually. And we're just, still trying to get roofs put on, and just a lot of blue tarps still on a lot of houses on their roofs. So
I bet. I remember that from living down in Miami after a hurricane. And I went through 3 or 4 down there when I lived there. And after the hurricane, there would be blue tarps everywhere because the roofs would come off.
Right.
There's hardly any blue tarps, but, we didn't have the kind of, our damage was caused by flooding. We don't take those direct hits from hurricanes. And I guess that's why the roofs come off, because of all the wind. I'm not really talking like a weather forecaster here. I'm not sounding very knowledgeable about hurricanes. So we had, for those of you trying to keep track of what's going on with hurricanes, we had Helene come through, which caused so much damage, and then we had Milton only a week or two later.
Which that really came into Siesta Key, Sarasota, more so than the Bradenton area, which Sarasota and Bradenton are right next to each other. But Siesta Key beaches, they got the brunt of it, I think, worse than our beach did in Bradenton, which I work both areas. So it's going to take them in Siesta a little bit longer to clear up than it will the Bradenton beach area.
So what are you seeing as you drive around? For people who love that area, and of course, you know, we all have so many people that love going to the west coast of Florida. For those of you in California who don't tend to go to Florida to vacation because it's so far, that's the west coast of Florida, by the way. What are you seeing when you're driving around, Margaret or Chris? Anybody jump in that's on the west coast of Florida? When you're driving around, are you seeing, you know, obviously you're seeing a lot of blue tarps. Are the hotels open? Is tourism coming back? Are the restaurants open? Are you seeing trees piled up by the side of the road? What are you seeing?
Well, Margaret's down a little further south than I am. She's in the Naples area, so we're about 2 hours apart. But here in the Sarasota, Bradenton area, a lot of restaurants are back open on Longboat Key, which is right in between Bradenton and Sarasota. A lot of the restaurants down in Siesta Key are about half of them have been able to open back up that are on the beach end. But for the most part, the rest of Sarasota and the rest of Bradenton, it's just a matter of them picking up the debris. But all restaurants, stores, and everything are back open and up and running like nothing ever happened.
Well, of course, you're in Florida where, you know, I used to live down there, so I've got some experience of this myself. It's just run so well in such a way because you're used to dealing with hurricanes. And you've also got a governor down there who's all over it, right? Anytime anything happens. What about in Naples? Anything go on in Naples, Margaret, that you saw?
Yes, it was really incredible. The Helene actually had a storm surge of about 4 feet. And then when Milton came, it was a foot higher. So it was 5 feet.
Wow.
And that was over in the coastal areas. And I mean, it was unfortunate, but it was the homes that were along there that really got hit. But the main area where it was severe was in Lee County. And in Lee County and Charlotte County, you have some of those islands that are over there that really were affected by the damage of it with the surge. I mean, there's some restaurants that aren't even reopening. And another aspect of it that was horrendous were the tornadoes. We had a lot of tornadoes here that really affected Naples, Fort Myers. I mean, just from the aftermath of it all.
And that's unusual, right, to get the tornadoes in your area.
It is.
Yeah, we normally see those in the Midwest and over the flat areas for obvious reasons, for anybody that knows anything about weather, which obviously I don't know too much about it. But yeah, I do know that it's kind of unusual to see the hurricanes and tornadoes in Florida, not the hurricanes, which again, when you're dealing with something you're unused to, which is what happened with Helene here. And really, it was those two hurricanes coming back to back that really caused the problem there. So thank you so much for that update. And we're all giving hugs and prayers to everybody in the areas where that kind of devastation has gone on. We're still picking up in the Asheville area, but like I say, a lot of it is open. We've got a lot of people visiting, and there's a lot of businesses that are being hurt very much, and they're all looking forward to the tourism now. Isn't that the truth? I mean, we really want people back here, and although people seem to be back here, Joe, you're here. Don't you see so many people driving around?
The first thing I did once places opened up, I was searching them out, right?
Well, we've got cabin fever.
Right.
It reminds me of COVID when we couldn't go out to eat. And okay, this time it was only a week or two in most cases. And, the average restaurant employs 80 people. I was at one last night that 8 to 8 pizza that has, they think, 50 or 60 people. And that's a small pizza joint, right? That's a lot of people. So when something happens like this, that's a lot of people out of work for a week, 2 weeks, and sometimes for good, which is obviously terrible and quite devastating for an area. And those people are back at work now in the main. I mean, not everywhere, but in the main. Probably 95% of the restaurants are back open. And let's go support them. WNC strong, right?
Definitely. I'll do my part.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've got to do that, right? So, okay, so we're talking today about the 6 biggest financial mistakes when building a home and how to avoid them with Joe Shively. This is Rowena Patton on the Real Estate News Radio Show, if you've just tuned in. And Joe, we've got about 15 minutes left. I don't know where the time goes on our shows. It goes so quickly because we're enjoying ourselves so much. Even Randy, our producer, who we drag out of bed on a Saturday morning, I think enjoys hanging out with us on a Saturday. But he's got to say that, I guess, hasn't he?
Say that. I do. After how many years? 12?
12 years, yeah.
I'm kind of used to it.
12 years of a Saturday morning, and Randy wouldn't want to hang out anywhere else, right, Randy?
That's right.
So what else you got for us, Joe?
Probably turning the water on too soon, or, for instance, or before you move in and leaving it on.
What's
a
wrong
couple
with that?
horror stories. One contractor I know, they were having a housewarming party, his client, and so they turned the water on and checked stuff on a Friday, and then they were going to have the housewarming party on a Sunday, I think.
So they were sensible, and they checked it out before time because they're going to have this lovely party.
Sure, and then something popped loose and in an upstairs bathroom, and it ran water the whole weekend. And when they opened the door, they got a surprise they didn't want, and obviously they had to cancel the party. But
surprise!
If it's in an upstairs room, I mean, it's bad enough if it's in a downstairs room. But
that's awful.
Yeah, so it was thousands and thousands of dollars.
So I think this may have happened to people who have gone away from the homes in Helene, for example. A lot of people left in the city of Asheville right when it happened. How many weeks in now are we, Randy? I'll put you on the spot for a minute so you can figure it out.
We're 7 weeks in.
You know it. I love the fact I put you on the spot and and you said the water's probably going to be drinkable again next week.
Yeah, the Asheville City water customers, they will do that pending the results of extensive testing on Tuesday.
At least we can flush the toilet and wash our clothes and all that. It's not even affected me because I don't drink the water anyway. I drink bottled water, so but obviously we want drinkable water back. I mean, even when you're feeding your dogs, we're giving them bottled water. So, I mean, obviously...
A lot of chlorine in the water, though. And that's why I have this blonde hair.
Yeah, that's why. Me too. That's why I have all this blonde hair. Yeah, that's the reason why, I'm sure. And I want to know who that lovely man is who calls me every day and says, this is a notice from the city of Asheville.
They call you twice and they text you twice.
Yes.
There's 4 events on my phone every afternoon.
I get it in Spanish too. Who is that lovely guy?
One in English each.
And it was so funny yesterday because you know what he said? This has some new information because he realizes that every time we listen, we're like, delete. And it comes in as spam. Not delete, I mean end on your phone,
Exactly.
But who is this guy? I'd love to know who this guy is. Who is this secret guy who calls us every day? Thank you for doing that because that takes 5 minutes out of your day saying the same old thing every day.
That was addressed in one of the daily briefings from the city.
Funny.
People were complaining about that.
The most hated guy in Asheville.
Yeah, right. But they are required by federal law to warn you that there's a boil advisory.
And whomever you are, thank you. Big hugs. We'll take you out for a drink one night, whomever you are.
Clear.
Do you think he's real? Is it an AI?
Yeah,
is it a bot? I think he's real, don't you?
I don't know. I don't have listened long enough to find out.
You hit end right away. That's hilarious. So, you wonder, a lot of people went away because, not that it's their second home, they live there, but myself, I moved out for a couple of weeks because 8 days in, I'm running a national business, and I need to be able to get hold of my clients, my listings here, my buyers coming in here. We had no internet. So, I had to go and move somewhere else. So I left the house. I'm back in the house now. However, I didn't turn the water off. I didn't quite know what to do. And I have heard things where when the water's turned back on, it creates so much pressure that it causes a problem and you get floods. Is that true, Joe?
I've heard that, but it could happen. You could have your sink left on and you wouldn't know it, for instance.
Oh, yes, because
So
you're
all
trying
that-
seeing whether the
right.
water's on or not.
Right. So
Oh, no.
you have that overflowing, right?
Oh.
While you're not home for days and days. And
So turn your water off if you're leaving for an
Sure,
extended time,
absolutely.
basically. And if you were building a new house, wouldn't it be great? And I think they have these now. The switch that you switch off when you leave, it switches everything off. It's like a whole house switch, basically.
well, you could oftentimes where I'm usually built at in rural areas, they have the well anyway, so you can just turn the breaker to the
I
the
see.
well off. Just make sure your breaker is also off to the hot water heater. But the water shut off a lot of times in a crawl space. It's not very convenient, like a lot. If you sold a house to a librarian, for instance, she wouldn't crawl in the crawl space and want to shut the water off, right?
So that got to do with being a librarian.
I don't know. I just pictured a 75-year-old woman crawling on her hands and knees in the
I
crawl
ain't going in the
space.
crawl space to do that
Right.
either. I don't even know where mine is. That's embarrassing, isn't it?
You should. for
Okay,
sure.
so we probably should do a whole nother show on winterizing your home because that one's really water's very important. I know, and I used to work for an insurance company, Zurich Financial, for a very long time. I used to work directly for the chairman, and one thing I found out is one of the most common home insurance claims is when the water line pops off the back of a fridge. The one that goes to the back of the fridge. I think they've changed code on those now, where they're not the little plastic thing that goes on.
The braided steel ones are the best, for sure.
I think they've changed the code on them now, or you tend to get those, but you want to change them if you have the old plastic one.
Amen.
And
I'm a
you
victim.
want, yeah, I'm a victim too. So many people are.
Yeah.
It's one of the most common
Yeah.
claims. And here's what it does: you're thinking, oh, it's just a little flood in the kitchen. No, it's insidious because it's just a drip, 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 drip.
And it never happens while you're standing in the kitchen.
Never.
No.
Right? It's always when you're
What's running
away
down the
from
back
the
of the-
weekend or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
It's running down the back of the fridge. You don't even hear it. So mine went, and I want to hear your story in a second, Randy. Mine went down the back of the fridge under the beautiful floor. It was like wide plank cherry floor. My entire kitchen had to be pulled out. All of my dining room had to be pulled out. And some of the cabinets had to be replaced. It was awful. I think it was $20,000 or $30,000 insurance claim. It was terrible. All from that little pipe on the back of the fridge. So anytime now, you can buy an alarm, and it's very inexpensive, and it's probably battery powered or something. That you put, and you can get battery powered ones that you just pop into the fridge, and at least the alarm goes off if it's dripping. Now, if you've got an Airbnb or something, good luck. But I guess the people renting it would hear the alarm going off, because it's not about that little drip that happens. It's about that little drip over time when it happens for 6 months. Mine actually, 12 feet away from where the fridge was, in the dining room, in a different room, I was seeing a bit of a dark patch, and I thought, oh, the dog's peed. Bad girl, Uma. Right? She was getting older. I thought, oh, she's peed on the floor. And it was darker, and the darkness never really went away. It was where obviously you get a low spot with water. It's where that water was sitting. Terrible. What was yours, Randy?
Very similar. The actual valve right on the back where that plastic tube connects to the ice maker, that valve split overnight. This only happened while we were asleep. Next morning, get up, step on the carpet in the bedroom, and squish.
In the bedroom?
Yeah, it had gone all...
You have a fridge in your bedroom?
No, this came from the kitchen.
Which sounds great, by the way.
And the finished basement, all that water on the floor went down to the ceiling of the basement, tore down sheetrock and light fixtures that fell on top of cars, and the cars had to be painted. And
what?
It one night of that valve leaking almost wrecked that home. I mean, we had to move out while all of this was...
It sounds like a country song.
It was
I might have to write that for you.
Sad country
That's
song.
awful. Well,
Make
how
you cry.
dangerous, too, if the floor starts going through.
And you have to gut a lot of stuff because once everything gets wet, right, it turns into
Exactly.
mildew
Yeah.
and stuff. Like I used to do some insurance renovations where the firemen would actually come in. They make a bigger mess than the fire. They take
Yeah,
a fire
of
hose and
course.
spray it all. Well, you have to gut everything then,
Yeah.
tear the sheetrock off the walls, all kinds of flooring.
And if you're a firefighter, thank you for your service.
Yes, exactly.
And we should say to veterans, of course, we had Veterans Day last week. Thank you for your service. Thank you to all of you out there, all the first responders and your families. And of course, we're proud supporters of Tunnel to Towers. You can read more about that at MLSheroes.com. You go to Tunnel to Towers, t2t.org. We actually, it's heroesmls.com. Sorry, heroesmls.com. We've got all the links on there, the videos and everything else. And it's just an amazing organization. It's only $11 a month. And we'll do a whole nother show on that because we've only got a few minutes left. But yeah, water is a really, really big one. But thank you for your service. And thank you to all the families out there that supported them through their service, because the whole family serves. That's a lot of people around each person that's serving. You know, the worry and the fear and just everything that goes along with that's not fun. What else you got, Joe? We got 2 minutes left. Give us all those
foundational issues. That's probably one of the biggest ones I see is like people scrimp on, if you're using a standard block foundation, for instance, you want to fill some of the block cells, the holes in the block, up with concrete and steel, and a lot of people try to scrimp on that or do the bare minimum. And just because it passes code doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. One of the local inspectors that teaches my continuing education class, he has a saying, a code is a bare legal requirement.
Wow.
And that's so true. You can
and he doesn't mean a fuzzy bear.
Right. So you're right. So for instance, if you put concrete every 4 foot in the wall, which depending on your backfill, if you get too close with a piece of machinery on the outside, you can put a gigantic crack or, stuff like that. So you want to exceed the codes and not do what your brother-in-law might tell you,
That sounds like real estate. It's always like, well, I'm in negotiations. Well, my brother, for clients. Well, my brother's in real estate in New York, and he said, you always got to live that. Well, first of all, every state's different in real estate, not to mention you don't know what's going on locally. Not to mention there's a reason why you hired me, I think, because you trust me. Now, do I want to hear other people's opinions? Sure. But there's usually a reason why I'm saying what I'm saying. And anybody that's worked with me knows that I'm explaining as much as you want me to explain. I'll give you all the underbelly of why I'm doing something, and all the strategies are there for a reason. That's why we're running the full market value cash offer. It's not for everybody, but it's for a lot of people that don't want to go through fixing up things on the house. They don't want to have to hire people like Joe and spend lots of oodles of money with him to clean up the house because of all the inspection issues. And that's what we're doing for these homes, and we're putting them right so that we can then market them and have the best listings on the market, which is what we've got. Give us one very quickly, Joe, to wrap us up.
Another one?
Yeah.
Let's see. How about not checking on your subcontractor's background?
My gosh.
Right? You just don't take somebody's word that they do good work. You check resources and talk to other people they've done jobs for.
That's kind of like my friend says again, isn't it? It's sort of the same thing. It's along the same lines. Well, Billy down the street had Johnny, who doesn't necessarily have a GC license, or some of these GCs, you just went through your continuing education for your general contractor. You have to do that every year, correct? You have to sit through.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, more training. I know you love it and learn so much from it.
The most boring day of my life, some days, some classes.
Well, and you're in it and you work in it, unlike many general contractors who, are basically looking over jobs and having a group of people on site, whereas you're in it. It's very different. So, yeah, it may even cost you a little bit more. Not always, it may. Joe, give your phone number so people can reach you.
It's 828-319-1449.
Thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you on the radio next week.
This has been the Plain English Real Estate Show with Rowena Patton. Visit Rowena and post your questions at radioasheville.com or call her at 828-210-1648.
We're Western North Carolina strong from the Apple Tree Automotive Superstore Studios. This is News Radio 57 WWNC, Asheville, an iHeart radio station.